This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, eliminate chaos and maximize profits. Got a great interview for you today with Ryan Perrone. He is the president of Nautilus Homes in Florida, and here's what you're going to get out of this podcast. You'll learn about the unusual benefits of starting a business in an economic downturn and some of the pains that Ryan wanted to feel starting a business, even though he didn't really need to. Next, you'll learn about the unique challenges of building high-end custom homes on an island. Ryan talks about when you have to taper your opinions. We get into the specific software and systems that Ryan runs his business with, and he talks about the big differences between Quickbooks and Sage for a few minutes. We talk about how setting expectations leads to happy customers. We talk a little bit about what's in it for you to care about other people's feelings, even if they are subcontractors or employees. You'll get more about that when you listen to the interview. Ryan talks about what it means to find shorter routes in your processes and how to do it, and why and how Ryan is constantly trying to work himself out of a job. Good conversation. Lots of great nuggets you're going to take away from this. I do have a few resources that I want to get in front of you before we get to that interview. Here we go. If you're a busy construction business owner, there's a pretty good chance that you don't have good visibility into your financials. You could be getting financial reports too late, or maybe not getting financial reports at all. Or maybe you're not keeping your books up and you really don't have any idea what your numbers are. Well, if that's you, you're not alone. Scott Schweiger said this: "I highly recommend Apparatus Contractor Services. My small startup construction company was over a year behind with its bookkeeping. I was wearing way too many hats, and ultimately the books suffered. They provided bookkeeping solutions that got us caught up in the systems to stay on the right track. I'm so happy I'm turning over payroll processing to them as well." Elizabeth Evans said, "Hiring Apparatus was a game changer for our business. They've allowed me to grow our construction company over 100% since we hired them about a year ago." Bill, president of Spice Industries, said, "Hiring Apparatus was one of the best business decisions I've ever made. They have almost completely freed me up from sitting at my computer reconciling budgets with my own makeshift system." So if you want to offload your bookkeeping or payroll headaches, or you just want better reporting, the Apparatus Contractor Services team may be able to help you. Visit goapparatus.com to hear from other construction business owners and see how Apparatus can help you. That's goapparatus.com. If you own a construction business, tell me if you've heard yourself say or think any of these things. "I feel like an island. The only people around who know what I'm dealing with are my competitors, and I can't talk to them. I'm working too many hours, and it feels like we need to make some big changes like hiring or systems or software, but I'm afraid it won't work out. I'm afraid it won't help, or I'm afraid I'll screw it up. I don't know what I don't know, and I would sure like to avoid an expensive learning curve." Maybe you've been figuring things out on your own for a long time. Maybe you're wondering, am I doing it right? Is there a better way to do things? Have you heard this one? "I have good ideas about processes and systems that will help, but I just can't seem to get myself to do the strategic stuff that's going to move the needle for me. I need accountability." Or maybe this one: I'd like to be part of something bigger than myself, to be part of a group that's making a difference in our industry. What about this last one? "I want to be constantly learning and improving. If someone else has already figured out a better way, I would like to know it." Any of those sound familiar, or any of those resonate with you? Well, I'm about to roll out something to connect you with other like-minded construction business owners who are doing similar work and who aren't your competitors. It's going to help you get accountability, help you share ideas, help you support each other, and be part of something bigger than yourself. However, I need your help. Before I finalize everything and get everything built out, I need to make sure that it is as valuable as possible for you. And that's where you come in. If you can take a short 2-minute survey and help me build this thing, I would greatly appreciate it. You can take the 2-minute survey over at buildermasterclass.com/. mastermind. That's buildermasterclass.com/mastermind. Thanks for your help. All right, now let's get to my conversation with Ryan Perrone of Nautilus Homes. Enjoy. All right, Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on here. How's it going today?
Good, Todd. Thanks for having me on here.
You bet.
Just trying to keep up with the demand right now.
That seems to be the common theme, is trying to keep up with the demand. So let's start with this. Tell us about your business, where you're located, and what type of work you do, and then just give us a general idea of the size and scale of your organization.
So I work for my company's Nautilus Custom Homes in Sarasota, Florida, which is about an hour south of Tampa on the Gulf Coast. We build luxury waterfront homes. We do most of our projects on the islands surrounding Sarasota, so Siesta Key, Lido, Longboat, so forth. And they're all, to say they're custom is kind of an understatement. I mean, every single thing on these homes is custom. What else about the company? I'm sorry, what else did you ask?
Give us an idea of the size and scale of the company, how many homes you build, and or how many employees you have, that sort of stuff.
Our typical home is around 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. We're doing at any given time 3 to 4 projects, and we have a team of 6 people. So we keep it pretty small. We subcontract pretty much everything. Currently don't even have like a labor on staff, but that's probably something that we will bring on fairly soon.
Got it. I appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned trying to keep up with demand is a challenge. What would you say are the top challenges or the things that you're really grappling with right now in your business?
Sometimes when it's one thing, our business is full of problem solving. I think that's what makes it satisfying. It's kind of what makes most businesses satisfying, is being very good at something and being able to solve the problems that come up. The problem right now is everything's a problem. So instead of being able to put your energies towards something and resolve it, you've got to put your energies towards things you never thought that would even be a question. So right now, we just were made aware that, trusses are going to be 40 weeks. So 10 months. We can't get pricing on trusses till we get a complete set of drawings. So to say that from our client saying go to us getting trusses is going to be 10 months. You can't run a business like that. And so, what are the options? And that's just one example. It's everything from trying to figure out where you're going to get appliances, having to call out and make sure that things are going to be available. And then of course the labor market as well. Just calling a subcontractor and saying, hey, we've got, 6 jobs coming up and we want most of them to be with you. Can you bump up your squad and have the labor that you need to do it? And the response is, I've been trying to, for the past 6 months, get people, and I've run $2,000 in ads and I can't get anybody on board. So it's across the board.
Yeah. Let's talk about building on islands and building in coastal areas. There's the whole Florida building code to deal with hurricanes and that sort of thing. But what are some of the unique challenges of building on an island?
When you get used to it, it's like riding a bike. It's just, when you're held to a high standard all the time, you just build by that high standard regardless of where you're at. And some of those things might be just making sure to ask for, when you're ordering windows and doors, or when you're pricing, is the most important part, because you give your pricing to your client, you want to make sure it includes these things, is to have your stainless steel rollers and internals in the door window system, to look for warranties on your doors and windows, your roofing, your exterior elements, and make sure that the warranties are not void by the location that you're in. So a lot of it is not necessarily from a constructability point of view, but from a knowledge of what can be put in these areas. There is, of course, the pilings, the dewatering, the additional zones like a FDEP, and having to go through those inspection services. And then, of course, from a scheduling point of view, if you are going to do pilings, what is that process and who are the players within that? And then another thing is here, traffic, trying to get on and off of these islands during season is a whole nother thing. So, from a manpower point of view, superintendents trying to get other jobs in the vicinity and try to give multiple jobs to that one superintendent in that area, so that they can kind of stay on that island rather than come off and go to another island and back again.
Got it. Yeah, windshield time becomes a big challenge. Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning, and tell me about what kind of work you were doing before you started your own business, or before your business started as it is today, if you were working in some other capacity. But yeah, what were you doing before you started Nautilus Homes?
I was working for my father's company, and he builds luxury custom homes in Sarasota as well. I was the vice president of his company. I had acquired my contractor's license and had gone through college to get a degree in construction management. So, ever since my father's company started in 1980. He was a carpenter prior to that, and he started a construction firm. So by the time I was born, 1984, it's well-established company. And by the time I remember being about 5 years old, being on the job sites, nailing in drywall, corner bead. So construction's definitely in the blood. His dad was a carpenter. His grandfather was a brick mason and came over on the boat from Italy. So I'm sure it goes back further than that as well.
So what made you decide to start your own business?
Yeah, a lot of people find that to be a peculiar move. When you have something sort of laid out in front of you to take over, there's a benefit to taking it over, because you're sort of running the race from the finish line instead of from a start line. For me, I wanted to know the pains of creating a company so I can have the respect for what it took to get there. I know that sounds a little masochistic, but that's an opportunity that I would miss out on. And I don't think that you can really understand what it means to be an entrepreneur unless you're the starter of the company. I don't mean to diminish other people's experience at all, but I felt like that was a valuable part of what my life should entail.
Interesting. So you wanted to know the pains of being the starter.
Yeah.
So what were some of those pains that you got to experience?
Oh man, it's very interesting. Psychologically, it really opened my mind to all the out in the field when you're. So I worked as a superintendent for most of my career with Perrone Construction, and when you're out there, the guys, the plumbers, electricians, painters, you say, I need you to be here, and I need you to be here, and I need you to be doing this, and that's not the right way. It's, here's what the plan says, change that. You don't have to ask nicely. I'm not saying you don't want to be rude, you don't want to be mean, none of that. But it's more matter of fact. It's somewhat similar to maybe like the military, where you just say, this is what needs to be done, and there's not a whole lot of ifs, ands, or buts about it. When you move into an office setting, that to me was very different, because I was on a PM level. Even though I was vice president over there, I was essentially running all the jobs in a way from a process point of view, but I didn't have that interaction with office staff. And so that was one of my biggest hurdles off the bat, because I knew how to build a house. I just didn't know how to do all of the psychological interactions.
So let's talk about those psychological interactions. What were some of the the walls you bumped into, or the surprises you ran into when you got into that environment?
That one's a tough one.
Are you talking about office staff, or are you talking about office politics and culture? Like what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
When you're dealing with, all of a sudden you go from dealing with essentially a completed set of drawings and guys in the field to, dealing a lot with the homeowners, the architects, interior designers, cabinet designers. It's a whole different mindset of people. And so there's a lot more hand-holding from a client point of view. You have to taper your opinions quite a bit. You're not the boss in that world anymore. So you're working very much with the team rather than being the leader of the team. And of course, being a young man as well, I started the company when I was 25. So that also, I'm sure, lent to some of the challenges that you face. But yeah, I would say it's kind of like office politics in a way, where you see it in a bureaucracy, and when you deal with corporations, nobody really says, hey, Tony didn't get this thing submitted when he said he was going to get it submitted, and so that's why we're behind. There's all this kind of beating around the bush that happens. And dealing with that when out in the field, it's very much like, hey, Tony didn't get this taken care of, so we're going to have to move you guys over here. It's all just very literal. Whereas over here, it's very office politics.
Yeah, it is. It's very different. In the field, you have a set of specs, you have a set of drawings, you have contract documents, very black and white, like literally black and white. What the end result needs to be, and it's very binary. Did they do it? No. Right. Yes, they did. And when you're dealing with customers and you're dealing in an office environment where you're talking about policies and procedures and stuff with some nuance, it's a lot of gray. That's for sure. Yeah. And
that's a good way to put it.
And it definitely requires. I've seen a lot of superintendents, a lot of people who come from the field struggle to make that transition because they lack what I've heard called that bedside manner. You can be a good surgeon, a good doctor, but if you have no bedside manner, then you're just going to piss everybody off. And I've seen that a lot, because when you apply the superintendent managing subcontractors approach in the office or with clients, it just doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So let's go back to before you'd started your business, and tell me about how you made the decision to go into business for yourself, and specifically, what was your biggest concern before you made that jump?
So to be clear about my business, my father and my brother and I worked at Perrone Construction. My father owns the company. And we actually started Nautilus Homes together as a team from a concept point of view. And then I jumped in and asked to be the manager of the company. So they manage Perrone and I manage Nautilus. And we get together and we discuss ideas, and which is actually really cool to have the opportunity to discuss ideas and collaborate, because we very much have gone in very different directions, from a nuanced point of view of how we want to develop the companies. I'm very technologically savvy, and so that is something that I've tried to integrate a lot into the company. But anyways, to digress and come back to what my biggest concern was, I think everybody's biggest concern when they start a company is having the jobs that make you happy to do what you do. You can find jobs. People need certain things done. Starting a construction company, or really any company in 2010 was not, something that a lot of people were doing. But we saw a niche, and Perrone Construction was getting into building, at the time we were doing a couple $20 million houses. These are extreme houses. And we said, hey, I think that Perrone's getting into a niche where we need to, kind of fill in down below it and do what we call a jewel box home. And so with that term, essentially use the same level of quality and care that we put into these $20 million homes, put it into, 3,000, 4,000 square foot home, might be, $2 million, $3 million home. And people seem to like it, but that was what we wanted to do. And I didn't want to do anything but that. So I guess my biggest concern was getting stuck in something that didn't work towards our goals. And early on, we got a project that was about a 10,000 square foot house. And anybody who's just starting a company that gets offered to build a 10,000 square foot, $5 million home would probably be pretty excited about that. But I looked at it, the quality of design, the quality of what the client's expectations were, I could tell was fairly low. And I went to partners and I said, I think if we took on this home, that we would start the company in a direction that was contrary to the intent. And so we refused the project. We kept only fighting for the projects that we wanted. And sometimes that wasn't the easiest thing to do. But I think in the end, I'm proud to have done that. Kind of like selling out, I guess, if you're a rock star. So I would say the biggest thing is trying to always do what we wanted to do and not get sidetracked.
What was one thing you believed to be true about leading a business that you were surprised to find out wasn't true after you got into your current seat?
Well, it's probably not news for anybody that started their own company, but when you start a company, it's you have this dream of taking time off, that it's you get to be your own boss. You're driven by the success of the company. You know that it rests on your shoulders, and you can have great employees, a great team around you. But at the end of the day, you never stop working. I mean, you're sleeping, you're working, you're on vacation, you're working, and and then in some cases it's a lot more literal, where you've got to put in 20-hour days to make it happen, and you've got to put in your weekends, even though all your friends are out on the boat, and you got to do those things. And that's not necessarily what people think about on day one. And I wouldn't let it slow you down. I mean, don't let it keep you from doing that thing that you want to do. You've got to, yeah, you got to push through, because eventually I think you have a story, for your life, of something amazing that you created and the team around you.
Yeah. So let's go back to something you mentioned. You mentioned that you started a home building business in 2010, probably somewhere near the middle of the Great Recession, a couple of years after it started. What would you say were the benefits of starting a home building business in that sort of economic environment, if any?
You get to ramp up. I mean, you get subs to show up to a job site. That's for sure. You get to ramp up. You get to do your mistakes, make your mistakes on a slower growing company. I've seen a lot of companies come into our market, and all of a sudden they've got more work than they know what to do with, and then the next thing you know, they disappear. And I think there is some wisdom in taking it slow, picking the jobs you want, and building your company very consciously.
Yeah, I've interviewed a few folks who started businesses in 2008, and they both said that it forced them to be disciplined. Mm-hmm. They had no other option. They had to be lean. They had to bootstrap, because nobody was loaning money to construction companies at that time. There wasn't much work, and it forced them to be really lean and develop discipline. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So it's actually it's a little dangerous in a way to start a business right now in the construction industry, because you really don't have to work for it. There's so much demand that you can be sloppy, you can be undisciplined, and it will turn at some point. And the people who are planning for that are the ones that will survive. And the people who are selling themselves into bankruptcy right now, they're not. And that's an interesting paradox, that these great times we're in could be an extinction level event for a lot of people who don't know how to handle it. Yeah. A couple of specific questions for you. You mentioned you're a technology guy. What are some of the systems and software that you use to run your business?
Systems and software. I mean, and I'll answer the question, but I think one of the key things behind systems and software is we see them kind of like in the medical world, we would see a pain reliever. Okay, I buy this thing and I take this thing and I'm all good. And I've seen it, won't go into the details of that, but I've seen it where you buy the thing and you don't use it. And then what good does it do you? It's actually doing you bad, because these systems aren't cheap. So we work with Procore, which is it's a cloud-based project management software. That's where we do our office, our site stuff, RFIs, submittals, document control, and I guess that's a lot of communication with clients and architects and interior designers as well as subs. We don't use the financial side of that program, but we use Sage 100 Contractor for the financial side. Now they do integrate. We have not integrated them yet. I would say the number one thing, I think people probably look at Procore and it's very appealing, but the number one thing in a business was Sage. And I got onto Sage in 2012. It's expensive. It's expensive to train. It's expensive to set up, all of these things. But that was one of my first investments. Where I came from, we were using QuickBooks, And so we just started with QuickBooks, same kind of numbering system, et cetera, et cetera. And I quickly realized the inadequacy of QuickBooks. The accountant would always be like, oh, well, it's somewhere between this range and that range, where your cash is. And that's one of the biggest things in this business is being able to track your cash, because you have $1 million of ins and outs every month. if you're, depends on how much work you're doing, but to have that much ins and outs and not have a firm grasp on what your cash is actually just scary. And it doesn't need to be scary. It can be you can know at any given moment. So those are the main programs we use, and that the Sage would be the number one that I would recommend. Procore. We have eTakeoff for estimating, and then of course the Microsoft Office 365. I love that because anywhere in the world you can log on and you still have your Outlook is set up just the way you like it. All your documents are right there, and of course Dropbox for the office staff, not for the field.
So 2 questions. I want to talk about Sage a little bit. What's the biggest benefit of Sage over QuickBooks?
QuickBooks doesn't understand. It's like a PO system. So it says I'm going to buy one widget, and I got one widget. Whereas Sage understands that there are contracts and subcontracts, and if, let's say, I'm subcontracting the plumber for $100,000 worth of work, the invoices go against that. So I might get 8 invoices against that one subcontract, and it tells me when they've overbilled, because that happens a lot. Before we had this, and actually one of the reasons we got it was we had a lumber supplier that had overbilled us by about $12,000. We ended up paying it, even though I had a very rigid control on things. We still ended up paying it, and then I had to go fight to get it back. I didn't want to. Just that alone would pay for Sage. So that's why it's huge. And for a lot of other reasons, it's massive. All of our subcontracts, we have a form that goes into Sage. When I sign up a subcontract, I put all the information in there, and it auto-fills the whole form. I can email straight from there. It sends it out to the team or to the subcontractor with the subcontract form with the signed proposal, and then my office manager make sure that we get the signed documents back. It's through and through. It's huge.
Yeah, I had no idea Sage had that sort of capability. Let's talk about Procore. What has Procore done for your business? Like, how is your business different now with Procore than it was before?
So any business is just an accumulation of processes. That's, in my mind, the definition of the business. And Procore, Sage, any of these systems, what they're doing is they're selling you sort of a pre-made process that can kind of plug into your machine. So if you've used Procore at another business and you're very familiar with it, it's a no-brainer to bring it in because you know how to use it. Same thing with Sage. But if you're coming from let's say a smaller outfit that doesn't have that kind of technology and didn't have phenomenal processes, you're at a very big disadvantage to your competitors. And so trying to integrate these systems into your lack of process will help you build a structure to kind of build everything around. Gives you an idea what other people are doing. I've got a big benefit of having a father that's been in the business for 40 years. So even with that benefit, I still find this to be a massive benefit.
Yeah, you mentioned contractors who don't use a system like this are at a disadvantage. Why is that?
because of how seamless it makes our communication. So all conflict, I'm trying to think of the quote. It's like all conflict comes from miscommunication, essentially. So if you look at everything from that point of view, your communication becomes the most important thing that you're doing within the company. So process is the thing that needs to be followed, and the communication is what allows that to run smoothly. And what Procore does is it puts a little place for everything to be. So your RFIs and your RFIs, your submittals are in your submittals, your drawings are in your drawings. It creates this very clear place for all of your questions. And then when those questions get answered, that gets put on the drawings. And once that's on the drawings, you make sure in your subcontracts that all your subs understand that they need to go to the drawings digitally whenever they're going out to the site. A lot of times they'll rely on, oh, I got this printed set when I got my contract and I'm good. No, the current set that is on Procore is automatically integrated into their contract. That's an important aspect of communication.
Got it. I'm a big systems and processes guy. And what I've found is a lot of people buy software, like you said. They buy software, and what I've heard is we signed up for fill in the blank software, and we've been paying for it for 1 year, 18 months, 2 years, and we haven't used it yet. And I think people underestimate two things. They underestimate what they need to have in place before they can use software successfully, and they underestimate the effort necessary to implement it and get it running. Maybe they think it's like a pain reliever, like, oh, I'm going to put my credit card information in, sign up for this cloud-based service, and my symptoms will magically disappear. And it never works like that. So what would you say are the keys that people need to have in place so that their software can be successful? Maybe the top one or two things that they really need to consider spending some time on before they put their credit card information in.
It's just like anything you do. You got to be willing to jump in to the deep end with it. One of the things that I did, and I sort of did it in retrospect, is I created a workflow diagram for the company. And what that did was allow me to determine, smoother routes. Essentially, if you think about it as essentially a bunch of piping, I was able to remove a lot of the piping that we had and straighten out the routes throughout the company. And again, Procore and Sage also help with this because they have sort of a built-in routing that's fairly efficient. But then, I think of Procore in particular as almost an employee, and that employee needs a manager. And so we have an employee in place that manages all the input into Procore. In a way, I mean, we have lots of people inputting things, but he sort of is there to always make sure that it's staying clean and that it's doing its job properly. So you can't think of this thing as that it's just going to do its job without being supervised.
Yeah, I like that idea. Think of it as an employee that needs to be managed by someone. Yeah. And what I've heard is an old saying, the best way to starve a horse is to have two people feed it. So if it's everybody's responsibility to keep Procore up or to keep co-construct or build or trend or whatever it is, if it's everybody's responsibility, then it's probably nobody's responsibility.
Yeah.
And things can hide there. So let's talk about the implementation side. And I love, before we get into that, I love the flow diagram, the shorter routes. I really like that analogy. That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about implementation. What are the keys to implementing a new process, whether it's software or maybe it's just a policy or a new way of doing business? When you think about that, what are the keys to implementing something for you?
When you are a sole proprietor, starting from day one, you just go out and you do whatever you need to do on a daily basis to get things done. And you're relying on yourself. So you don't really need a manager to look over it and make sure that you're doing it the right way, because hopefully you're doing it the best way you know how. And your goal is to work yourself out of a job every step of the way. I'm still working myself out of this job, and there's a next job that I want to give more attention to, and so forth. But it's all within the same idea of the company, but I can fine tune that next process and that next process. The idea is that you're looking to give away this job. So in order to do that, you have to be able to define what that job is. And a job description is a good start, but having a workflow is what gives that legs, and having it visually. So writing it as like an outline, that's a good start to creating a workflow, like a bullet pointed outline. But once you get it into an actual workflow as like an image, I think that's when it really starts to take legs. And once you have that, you can have that printed out, put on a bulletin board, and anytime that people start something new, they can refer to it. A lot of the things that we do, we might permit a job. If we're doing 4 projects a year, we might permit a job once every 3 months. So what does that process look like? We might price a job once every 3 months. So what does that process look like? You can't remember, the nitty gritty of what it is. So I think the big thing is when you have to step back. The immediate thing is when you're growing a company is, I'm so busy, I just need somebody in here. And you get that person in here and you just do whatever you need to do to take the weight off of me. And that's good for a while. And some people can handle that. But at a certain point, you get to a mass where it leaves too much weight on your shoulders to not know that they're doing it exactly like you would do it. And there will be some loss of fidelity. But if you have that prescription there, the loss of fidelity is you can assume the degree of that and the responsibility of what comes with minor failures.
Loss of fidelity. What does that mean?
Like the way you would do it, there's that saying, if you want it done right, do it yourself. You can't run a business like that. It's not a business, that's just you. But if you want it done as close to the way you would do it, you have to accept a certain loss of fidelity, a certain clarity that of process that gets diminished by passing it off.
Yeah. So the way I talk about delegation, there's a couple of things I talk about with delegation. Number one is focus on what needs to be done and delegate results, not actions. And secondly, delegation math says 80% done by somebody else is better than 100% done by you. So maybe that 20% gap there is that loss of fidelity. And that's a tough one though, because if people buy into that philosophy of, if you want it done right, it's got to be your way, or you've got to do it yourself. And you have to give up that control of how. And then you also have to be really disciplined and articulate what you want. And that's, if you can articulate what winning looks like, what the desired end state is, and then put some guardrails on the how we get it done, budget, timeframes, quality, etc. What I've found is you'll be blown away by the results. You'll be blown away at how good and how smart your people are. when you delegate effectively like that. But no, I like that. I like that. Okay, let's talk about failure. Let's just take it down. Let's go down to the pit of despair. And I'll ask you this. One of my favorite questions is, how has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success?
I think there's a lot of failure in business, and there's a lot of failure in life. I mean, you're essentially just try to minimize all of those and learn from them. Every step along the way should be, if you're not learning from the failures, you're kind of doing it wrong. Going to do it over and over. But I've been pretty lucky, and I don't know if it's luck or hard work or having good mentors. I've had some pretty incredible people throughout my career that have taught me all sorts of different parts of how to manage a company, from carpentry to management of people from a superintendent point of view to managing the whole company. And I work alongside some awesome people as well. So I haven't had too much failure. I would say one thing that I did run into is I had an office downtown, a rental, and then I had to move out of that office because sort of the boom started, and it wasn't cheap to have an office downtown anymore. So I had to find a new office, and rather than rent and keep my expenses fairly low, I went ahead and bought a building. And that's a big expense for a young company. I figured it'd be a good investment overall, and for my lifetime. What it caused is, I thought I'd rent 2/3 of it out, keep 1/3 of it, and it would pay for itself. Well, 5 years later, finally renting 1/3 of it, and I would say that's as close to a failure as we've come. But the reason it's a failure is because it made me have to work harder and not be able to put my resources towards marketing, actually building homes. I had to put a lot of my efforts towards, making sure that we could make the mortgage, and now it's fine.
Got it. Let's talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What's one of the lessons that you took away from that book?
I think that book's very valuable. We should. I grew up in the business, and I grew up in my father's business, and so I know how he does things. But I didn't have the opportunity to work for other larger companies like Skanska, for instance, a major commercial company, and find and see their systems, or work for other, let's say, a technology-based company, and kind of build these various skill sets. I think he points out that he chose to work in certain directions to kind of build this treasure trove of skill sets and then apply it to his goal. So he probably got started later in life towards his end goal, but he had all these tools to do that. And I think that's a really a smart way to do it.
So we're running short on time here. I don't want to be cognizant of your time. I'll ask one of my next favorite questions, which is this: what is something you believe to be true about business that some might think is unconventional or even crazy? Actually, I want to repeat that question. Is there any chance you could get that person to talk a little quieter? I'm hearing a lot of background noise.
I'm sorry. Hey guys. All right. Sorry about that.
No problem. He's got might be one of those guys with a big voice that carries. Um, so let me ask you one more question, which is, what is something you believe to be true about business that some might think is unconventional, maybe even a little crazy?
Um, Let me stop them again. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. So one of my favorite questions is that I ask everyone on the podcast, if possible, is this: what is something you believe to be true about business that some might think is unconventional or maybe even crazy?
I would say it's less about what you know and more about how you make people feel. Um, I think I'm always working or moving in that direction. Uh, Everybody's got an opinion, and uh, it's about making them feel heard. And it doesn't necessarily need to go in their direction at the end of the day, but you can encourage them to share their ideas, and whether it's a client, whether it's a subcontractor, whether it's an employee, um, allowing people to be heard, and also learning how to express not just the idea that you have, but why that idea makes sense to you. That's huge. I know it seems like a simple thing, but that's something I found to be huge.
So I can imagine what's going through some of the listeners' heads. Like, okay, you're telling me that I need to be concerned about how people feel. Like customers, I get it. The boss, I get it. But I'm imagining a superintendent who's sort of like what you described toward the beginning of this conversation. Go do this, you do this, task oriented. Like, why should I care how they feel? What's in it? Yeah, what's in it for me? We're not here to talk about feelings, Ryan. We're here to get shit done. So,
Yeah.
like, what would you say to that person who never thought about their subcontractors' feelings or maybe even their crew members' feelings?
I, to some degree, I totally, I totally agree. I mean, that's the hang up of going from being, a superintendent, being in the field, to being in the office, is that you realize we're not all as binary, I guess, as, this needs to happen and that needs to happen. And if for what it takes to do business, you kind of have to be a binary person, because you have to make decisions. People are looking at you to be a leader. You have to make decisions. But in order to get people on board, you can look at politicians, a great example. They actually have to sort of get people to agree with the direction of where they want things to go. So all of leadership is allowing people to be heard. People don't necessarily need things to go their way. They just need to be heard. And sometimes there'll be some good ideas in there, but it can't just be like, well, I listened to you, and at the end of the day, I decided to go this way. So that's the thing you got to massage.
I read this in a book once that really stuck with me. Everybody's a volunteer. So every employee is there because they choose to be. Every subcontractor who works with you is a volunteer. Frankly, they could go work for anybody they wanted to right now. So every employee, even though they're getting a paycheck or they have a contract with you, they're a volunteer. And when we treat people that way, when we treat everybody as a volunteer who's coming along with us, I think it changes the dynamic. And I've certainly seen what it looks like from the old salty superintendent who bragged about firing every carpenter in the labor hall back in the day and how soft everybody is nowadays. But those days are gone. And the days of ruling with an iron fist, maybe it worked in the 60s, 70s. Probably not. but it definitely doesn't work these days. So that's great advice. One last question here. If somebody said, Ryan, I'm thinking about planning and I'm thinking about and planning to start my own business, and then you could ask them one question that they really need to think about, what would it be?
I would say, what will make your business stand apart? There's lots of businesses out there that do exactly this, produce custom homes. And that's what people are going to ask you. Why should I choose you over somebody else? And, a lot of times you see passion is the response. And it's just, passion's not the answer. Everybody feels like they're passionate about what they do. So it's got to be something a little bit more palpable.
Got it. Good advice. Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you going down the rabbit hole on systems and processes with me. Thanks for sharing about your business. If people want to connect with you, follow you on social media, get to your website, any or all of the above, where are some of the best places for them to go?
Well, Nautilus-homes.com is our website. We have all of the links to our social media on the bottom. But Nautilus Homes SRQ is our Instagram handle, and that's always got a awesome. We try to make it cool, and then Facebook, we kind of do a little bit of Facebook stuff, but we've created some really cool videos too. And that's my favorite kind of avenue for marketing right now. And YouTube, I don't know exactly what our handle is on YouTube.
Gotcha. Actually, I have one more question. You're working with high-end, very custom customers, and I'm curious, what are the top one or two expectations that you set with customers at the very beginning to try to head off problems?
I try to be the leader of the whole team. Every team needs a captain, and really, I haven't found that any client or architect, designer, it really tends to take that role. So somebody's got to take it, and that just happens, to be us. So we definitely let them know right up front that that's what our goal is. And, we don't want to necessarily put them in the passenger seat, but we want them to tell us their goals, and then we'll drive it forward. And then separately from that, we do have like a 32-page document that's called an expectations document, because clarifying expectations from day one is what creates a happy client. You have to build a nice house too, but just not leaving them in the dark, which is communication.
So some people would say, wow, setting expectations seems a little confrontational. It seems a little harsh, but how does setting expectations up front lead to a happy client?
One of the things where you get into a primary thing is with schedules. A client has this dream that they want a house, and so they went out and found this property, or they're looking for a property. If they don't understand what the timelines are from day one, just as an example of expectations, because there's a lot of different ones. If they don't understand what the timeline is, and they don't ask and you don't tell them, they might think, oh, okay, well, it'll take a month to design a house. It'll take 6 months to build it. And that's just not the case. And if they keep finding that their expectations, even though we never provided them, aren't met, then they're going to get agitated. So we just lay it out up front. And I don't, some builders will come in and say, I can build you a house for $200 a square foot. And it's impossible here to do that. And, I'd rather come in and say it's $600 a square foot, come in at $550. So I'd rather, undercommit and over deliver.
Got it. Good stuff. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. This has been fantastic. So folks, be sure to go to the show notes, grab those links, connect with Ryan. And I really appreciate it, Ryan. This has been great. I appreciate you taking the time to be on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Todd. You're a great interviewer. I appreciate it.
Thanks. There you go. Hope you got some actionable things and nuggets out of that interview. I highly recommend you pick one or two things and put them into action. Implement them. It's interesting to listen to this stuff, but you're not going to get any value out of it unless you execute it. Be sure to check out the show notes on your podcast player for all the links that we talked about. And if you could leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever you're listening to, that would be fantastic. Leave a comment on YouTube. I would really appreciate it. And speaking of ratings and reviews, I've got one of my favorite reviews recently came in from MD Hope, who said this: recently married to my man who runs a construction company, and I've set out on a mission to learn about the industry to better help him. This podcast has been surprisingly interesting for someone who thought this is a, quote, dry industry. I'm learning that I've had a not realistic preconceived idea of this industry. It's actually really cool. Thanks for the inspiration. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, MD Hope. If you could leave a rating or a review, that would mean a lot to me. If you are interested in joining a mastermind group for construction business owners, remember to please take that 3-minute survey over at buildermasterclass.com/mastermind. All one word, buildermasterclass.com/mastermind. If you are interested at all in learning more about or participating in a mastermind group for construction business owners. As always, thank you so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt from constructionleadingedge.com. I'll see you next time. If you're a busy construction business owner, there's a pretty good chance that you don't have good visibility into your financials. You could be getting financial reports too late, or maybe not getting financial reports at all. Or maybe you're not keeping your books up, and you really don't have any idea what your numbers are. Well, if that's you, you're not alone. Scott Schweiger said this: I highly recommend Apparatus Contractor Services. My small startup construction company was over a year behind with its bookkeeping. I was wearing way too many hats, and ultimately the books suffered. They provided bookkeeping solutions that got us caught up in the systems to stay on the right track. I'm so happy I'm turning over payroll processing to them as well. Elizabeth Evans said hiring Apparatus was a game changer for our business. They've allowed me to grow our construction company over 100% since we hired them about a year ago. Bill, president of Spice Industries, said hiring Apparatus was one of the best business decisions I've ever made. They have almost completely freed me up from sitting at my computer reconciling budgets with my own makeshift system. So if you want to offload your bookkeeping or payroll headaches, or you just want better reporting, the Apparatus Contractor Services team may be able to help you. Visit GoApparatus.